Okay. Here's my apple and my the mug, the which is sort of represented by this color study. I've already done a little bit on the apple, and the point here being that when we practice this color study, we're sort of doing a nice stair-stepping, letting things dry, and then doing a straight line. But the idea is to really sort of start understanding this color transition from a light shade of something to a dark shade of something, and having it transition in temperature and darkness value, and by definition a little bit of saturation, becoming more grayed out and less pure color as we get towards black. There's a lot more on that, but for these guys we're trying to do that in just a gradual transition. So that's when that's one of the several times, I should say, that things get tricky. So let's see what we can do here. I've already done a little bit of what I try to do is really kind of focus on the lightest area that I'm going to do, and follow it up down to, I'm imagining the light obviously coming, well, maybe not obviously, with that big old fun highlight, to have the the darker, getting darker down here. I know eventually it will. I'm not so much worried about that as I am kind of how well I'm transitioning each layer. So for the apple, I've started with this light orangey red. It's actually pretty orangey, which is fine. And now I'm going to bring in a little bit of a little stronger regular red. I have some other stuff mixed up here that I'm going to try to not combine. And I'm still sort of, I'll see. I think I'm choosing to paint around the highlight. That's a little bit tricky. But since I want this sort of effect, I want to leave the upper left sort of light as it is. I'm going to first paint with just some water, so that's going to have no effect as far as adding color or darkness to that area of our apple. But it will give us the ability to bring in our next color and have that be transitioning gradually. You can see once again I'm holding this at an angle, so here I'm going to bring in some actual paint. Let's see what happens here. Like those color studies, you can tell that part of this shape that I'm defining is getting dry in the upper left, so I can drop in more whatever I'm using to make it come down and mix with gravity. And that, in this case, it happens to be clear, but same idea as we were doing with those. Kind of finish up this shape, and then I will probably bring in a little bit more of the red color. Hopefully this is all, once again, hopefully on in frame. So that seems like I was more or less just wetting the shape, which in fact I kind of conceive of what I'm doing as redefining the shape I'm working on with water, sometimes, or with a paint. Sometimes it's clear water, sometimes it's a light mixture of water and paint, sometimes it's a dark mixture of water and paint, but the notion of defining the shape with a lightest value color that I know I'm going to want for that particular layer, and then moving to a darker. As I get down here, I'm just going to get rid of that pooling color, and you can be a little bit, please experiment with being more aggressive, like bringing in a little bit stronger color and not just dropping it in, but literally brushing it in. This will work after you've wet the shape down first, so you're going to get a blending effect. And once again, I'm not so worried about the lower right part, because I'm going to keep getting darker. I could sort of do that on this round, but what I'm really concentrating on is the transition of light to a little bit less light color, and I can, as I come back and do subsequent layers, I can deal with that. Trying to juggle all these things at once, especially if you're not familiar with what the heck this watercolor stuff does, can be, well, it can be fun, but it can be aggravating too. So I'm going to leave it like that to make that point. Let's see. I think it's dry enough that even if I sort of move it around, I'm going to paint a little bit on the mug. Basically, this sort of first very light blue layer, and like I hope I've either talked about or emailed about, I sort of goofed on referring to an apple in a bowl, which is what the big painting is going to be, but this is indeed not a bowl, it's a mug. But the same sort of color transition going on, same sort of round form. So I'm going to make sure I have plenty of paint, and I'm just thinking first initial pass. I'm not sort of too worried about a whole lot besides getting the shape wet with some light blue color on it. And I'm gonna, the shape I suppose the only shape I'm not thinking about is the inside here, which I may get to, I may not, and depending on how I feel or how this is going, I may include the handle or may not, which I know doesn't seem fair, because that handle is going to be sort of tricky to navigate. And as you guys have probably been trying this, I'm sure you've learned that it can be tricky depending on what kind of brush you have and how comfortable and familiar you are with using that brush. So just like those shapes, I'm kind of bringing in, just like this guy, I'm bringing in this color and I'm overlapping and I'm getting that pooling water and color. It's, like I said, it's going to be, I'll just sort of go for it here. Let me see what happens there. not bad. I'll discuss a little bit more about how to simplify three-dimensional structures and probably do the rest of that handle sort of in a different pass. But kind of nice to be able to have that whole contiguous shape with a layer of light blue. I certainly could paint the mug proper first and then the handle. If I do them sort of too separate and too different from each other, it won't look like part of the same object. It'll look too disjointed. So at least having some sort of underlayer like this helps define this object that you're painting as indeed a contiguous object. But as we move forward, it'll be relatively easy to make it feel like still part of that mug, even if we treat it after the fact and just paint the mug body first. So that's that pass. I'm gonna dry it and paint some more.